problem, and it's not instances. It's not, like I said, one bad person or a situation gone wrong. This has been going on for 150 years, almost 200 years now. Like I said, it's not teenage angst. Right? That's the first thing that popped up. And it's about who they serve, who they really serve. All right? They don't serve us. They don't serve regular common people. They serve rich people, and they serve the system. It's any other job, you don't do your job, you get fired. So what are they? You know? That's my brother and I. He serves tennis balls. Right. Also, thank you, Renee, for helping me out with this presentation and recording. And thank you, Alex, for the Schroeder. He helped me out with research. Yeah, thank you all. And there's a clapping sign there. I didn't go. Right. So, historical context, right? The police here in the South came by as an evolution of the slave patrols. What were the slave patrols? The slave patrols were essentially a band of white farmers who, most of them actually didn't own slaves, but would get paid by plantation owners to keep the population, the black population, under control. How do they do that? You know, whenever they would see a black person walking around in the city or in town, whatever, they would go up to them. If they were black, if they were free black people, then they would have to have their IDs or their cards or papers saying that they were free people. If not, if they were still owned by a plantation, then they had to have permission by the plantation owners, right? So even then, the police are actually the originators of the passport system here in the U.S. What is a passport? The passport is a sheet of paper that gives you permission to be someone, all right? So the police, the slave patrols, through their control of the black population, essentially created the passports. And through, as post-antebellum era, post-Civil War, with the urbanization of the U.S. or the country of the South, the police began evolving. Charleston was actually the first to pay slave patrols to pay them in a systematic way. It was the first to pay slave patrols in a systematic way, and the first to have a semi-centralized institution. Before Charleston, the slave patrols were just friends of plantation owners who needed extra cash, who needed favors, who owed favors, stuff like that. But in Charleston was the very first instance where a semi-centralized institution and money went out to these people to keep the population under control. Later, the slave patrols later evolved into the city guards, and the city guards did the exact same thing. They were there to control the black population. Once again, checking to see that the black person wasn't in the wrong side of town, reminiscent to these days. But it was to make sure that no one was doing something they weren't supposed to, because during those times, and I would argue today, white people, white population, fear not controlling the country. They fear not controlling their communities where they live, and so they have put these institutions, these people, in power to make sure that everything is subdued, right? And with urbanization comes the diversification of criminality. At first it was very simple. You're not supposed to be here. Wear your papers. Beat you up real quick. We don't want to hurt you because you're still property. I don't want to pay for something. But it was very simple, very straightforward. But then with the urbanization, crime started changing. You weren't not allowed to loiter. You're not allowed to be constantly drunk. That was one of the first laws. You weren't allowed to be constantly drunk. Not drunk in public, or not too drunk, but just not constantly drunk. And I find that kind of weird. But in the South especially, but in the entire U.S., the criminalization has been a moralistic thing, based on Protestant and Baptist values. You know, you can't steal because then you're not respecting the sanctity of private property. You know, you can't loiter because you're not working hard. You know, you can't drink too much because that's a sin. You know, you can't. Prostitution is a no-no because that just goes against the rules of God. You know, so criminalization, criminality has its base in morals, in Protestant and Baptist morals. You know, and so these moral issues essentially evolved into what is profiling, and instead of reactionary actions, like say I steal something, someone stops me afterwards through the moralization and through organization and the institution and the police system becoming an institution, they started becoming as a preemptive strike force. So they would walk around, they would hang out places where they thought that bad stuff was going to happen, you know. And keep in mind, this is 10, 20 years right after the Emancipation Proclamation. So still, all these ideas, all these all these profilings essentially is, well, black people are bad, they're lazy, they're immoral. So who are they going to watch? They're going to watch black people, you know. And then here in Texas, in the southwest of the U.S., well, it's the same thing. You know, Mexicans are lazy. You know, they're immoral. So who are they going to watch? They're going to be watching Mexican folks. You know, people of Mexican descent. You know, same in California, over in the West Coast. You know, Asian, Chinese folks are lazy. They're immoral. So this is profiling has been present since the very beginning of the police force. Right? It's, once more, it is not a case of it's not just one bad policeman. You know, it's systematic. It is ingrained in the system. The passports, United States of Sealand. What I was saying earlier, the detectives are looking around for the moral actions. So it's all these 150 years, almost 200 years now. It's the same shit. It's the same people. It's poor people and people of color. All right. We have some recent examples. Rodney King. You know, Rodney King, 91. We have Oscar Grant, or 2 years ago. We have Jose Campos Torres, who was in 77. That was actually here in Houston. He got drowned in the bayou. Robert Tolan here in Houston as well. This is another example. This, in my eyes, one of the key examples of the police checking people's passports. He is a wealthy background, right? There's Owen Belair driving up to his house in an SUV. The police, they thought the SUV was stolen, you know? It's a black teenager driving around in an SUV in Bel Air. So, goes up to his house, gets out, says, I live here, I live here. Cops, of course, don't believe him. So what happens? They shoot him in front of his mom in his driveway. Right? So this is a key example of police checking your papers. You know, you're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be here. And what is this reminiscent of? You know, something that's going on with talking about court here, Joe Arpaio. That is bacon, by the way. Where Joe Arpaio, he's in a crusade against immigrants, against brown people. It's for public safety, but in reality, he is disproportionately targeting one group of people. You know, he is quite literally checking their passports. You know, so this whole discussion of it's me. You know, you're attacking me, and that doesn't really happen too much to you. It's not the case. Oppression is not linear. You know, oppression is systematic oppression it doesn't take turns. It's not, well, first it was black people, then it was brown people, then it's extraterrestrials, you know? We're all being oppressed together, and we can't be free until all of us are free. And yeah, he's doing the exact same thing as the slave patrols. You know, he sees someone who's walking around, goes out and checks through the papers. So, what are you doing here? Oh, you know, just chilling. Well, let me see your papers. You don't have your papers. You don't have your plantation permission. You know, the passport, the U.S. passport with you. Then sends you to jail. You know, to be an actual slave. Because that's the thing. In prison, you work. There's a work prison, and you get paid cents. Yeah, that is in fact slavery. You know. He represents legalized white supremacy, which is tied to capitalism. The only reason why this country, well, not the only reason, one of the main reasons why this country is so powerful and has as much push as it does is because of white supremacy that was tied to capitalism. Right? They used the labor of indigenous people, they used the labor of black people, they used the labor of Mexicans and Hispanic people, they used the labor of Asians. What's that? Oh, it's historical, yeah, no, it's historical, yeah. They're using, yeah. Oh, thank you. They're using this labor to make money. You know? So this Piggy McCookchuck here, he is in fact the key representative of white supremacy, of legalized white supremacy. Right? And once again, with white supremacy, with the slave patrols, you know, that was, yeah, that's it. White supremacy with the slave patrols, black people were property. Black people were property. You know? And now, with the ICE, which is essentially a new police force, and not even that, police force are the new ICE, is what a lot of states are trying to do. It's Hispanics are nothing but labor. You know, absolutely nothing but labor. So it's not coincidental. It's not a coincidence that the braceros don't get harassed while working. You know, they get harassed on the way back from work, because not on the way to work, because then they can't make any money. You know, they get harassed on the way back from work. They get harassed in their houses, whenever they're with their families, with their friends, but not at work. You know, and that's not a coincidence. This is all tied to capitalism. This is all tied to production. This is all tied to white supremacy. All right. On that note, police are the mercenaries of capitalism. Right. Right. That means they enforce the laws. And now you say, oh, the laws are equal for everyone, you know. Our forefathers made this constitution on all this bullshit, you know. But let's think about this. All right, so a law says that I can't pick food or I can't pick the trash. Who's that going to affect? A rich person who can afford food, or a poor person who needs to pick food, you know? So yeah, the law is in paper not discriminatory, but in fact it is. They target a certain group, but they use doublespeak. They use a language that seems that is neutral, that seems that it's working for everyone, that seems that it's beneficial. You know, it's subjective, it's neutral, but that's not the case. And these are picture cops. The SWAT team actually here in Houston. Pretty sure, yeah. Houston or Austin, I can't remember. In their position as mercenaries, they break up strikes. You know, they're the people who corporations call to break strikes up. You know, however, whenever stuff's not looking too good for them, they strike themselves. You know, so it's not this moral issue of strikes bad. No, it's all about money. You know, the corporation, the companies, they pay the city, the HPD in this case, to break a strike up, to break a protest up because it's bad for business. But if the city is kind of screwing over the cops, they'll strike like that. There's been been strikes here in the South is NOLA, New Orleans, has been the one that's been affected by most strikes here in the South, where they wouldn't get paid. Or their checks would come in months later, and what they do? They don't do anything. Like, they'll stop working until the city works things out, and then they're once again in the pocket of the corporations, once again in the pocket of the government. Right? But a pretty cool thing that I found was that in Detroit in '67, the police force they did a ticket slowdown. What that means is that they would still pull people over, and they would still come in contact with people, but they wouldn't give them tickets. You know, they just give them warnings. And that happened for about 4 months. And in those 4 months, the city of Detroit lost $15,000 a day.
Wow.
All right. So next time you get a ticket for I don't know, say you litter, and the ticket comes back to be $280. You know, just once again, it's not because the pig's an ecologist. You know, it's not because he cares about your health and doesn't like that you smoke. It's about the money. It's always about the money, right? So, yes, who do they serve and who do they protect? They serve and they protect those with property. Those with property. You know, and Google even said it, even knows it. I searched property. This big ass nice house showed up. The very first thing that showed up. You know, it's not a regular person house. It's not an apartment complex. It's not a car. It's my beach house. You know, and it's who they serve. And once again, it's a job. It's all about money. I keep repeating that, but I want to stress it. You know. It's all about money. And once again, in Detroit, a really interesting thing happened. The Detroit riot, which was in '64, I'm not entirely sure when it was, '69, one or two. It was 5 days strike, 5 days of rioting, and that started because this cop goes into a speakeasy, a bar without permits. That was open after hours, right? So what was going on there? It was in a predominantly black neighborhood, and they were celebrating 2 Vietnam veterans. You know, they came back, they made it alive from the war, and the police were expecting 20, 25 people because that's usually what the number of people that are there. Instead, they found 80-something people. So they still decided to arrest every single one of them. So 3 cop cars, you know, pull up, and you see you try to arrest 80 people. You know, they're intoxicated, 3 in the morning, clearly outnumbered. What's gonna happen? You know, what did happen? And that was 5 days of rioting. And an interesting thing about this wasn't just a race riot, as a lot of times called. You know, like Rodney King was considered a race riot. You know, the one in Detroit was interesting because it had white folks as well, poor white folks that lived in that neighborhood, and they were the ones serving as sharpshooters. You know, they were protecting their friends, neighbors, and comrades down the streets by sniping the cops. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I'm not gonna lie. But that's an example of poor people coming together. You know, I've been saying this. It's about money. It's about money. It's about money. It's about race. But there's definitely historical cases where just the poor would come together, you know, and work together. Another example of that's a picture of Detroit, right? Another example of poor neighborhood being attacked and harassed by the police is a Compton cafeteria. And this story was actually, it was disappearing until about 2 years ago when this researcher started doing research about it. And what it was 1966 in the Tenderloin district in San Francisco, which is actually the poorest area in San Francisco. And the Compton Cafe was a hub for anti-poverty organizing. Excuse me. Was a hub for anti-poverty organizing in that area. And because all this started when the federal government refused to give the Tenderloin District any benefits, federal money for aid, right? But from that anti-poverty organizing, something really interesting happened. One of the first queer youth organizations, Vanguard, came out of that. With that, the business owners weren't really digging that too much. So the Compton cafeteria began giving service charges, but not to everyone. They're very discriminatory service charges, mostly to trans folks, And one time, there was this incident started when a table with trans folks, there was trans folks in Queens that were sitting at a table. They were talking, just chilling, and they were being charged. They were being charged a service charge, and they weren't going to have that. They weren't having that, right? They had enough dignity to say no. So what happened? Compton Cafe, House of Pigs, cop shows up, grabs one of the queen's hands, tries to escort her out. So she pours her coffee on his face. Right? Straight up, that's what happened. And a millie broke out. It was a millie of queer folks, And when I say queer folks, I mean anyone that is not confined to heterosexuality. It's not confined to heterosexuality or cisgenders. There's not cisgender. Cisgender is people who identify as the gender that they were born in. Right? So it's an all-encompassing term that I use here. But yeah, the millie was one between cops and queer folks. Going back to the Compton cafeteria riots, there's no record of this in the police records. There was no news articles written about this. So it's a combination of, people not wanting queer history to be out there, people not wanting people of color's history to be out there, people not wanting history of poor people to be out there, So, like the issue here in Compton Cafe that was almost forgotten, gender issues are a lot of times missing when it comes to police brutality or police issues. It's not, a lot of times it's not even thought about, like the law against prostitution. Who gets punished? There clearly at least two people need to take part in this action. But who's the one being punished? It's the prostitute. It is not the person buying the service, and that person is usually a male. So these issues are just dismissed. These issues are rarely talked about, and this lack of discussion is troublesome. It really is. For example, and I'm going to pick a bit on Christian Williams, the author of Police, Our Enemies in Blue. A lot of people hold this book. A lot of people hold this book in super high regard. It's a really good book. It's the only book I've read of its type where it gives the historical context of the police. It goes into the race aspect of the police. It goes into the capital aspect of the police. It goes into the organization aspect of the police. It just goes really in depth in the police, but doesn't mention gender issues. And it's important to note that since 1980, the number of women being incarcerated has increased by 400%.
Wow.
That's 30 years, 400%, and you're not even going to talk about that? You see, and this is why So we talk, prison, women in prison. I swear that's not how prison looks like. Lady Gaga is not going to be there with sunglasses with 50,000 cigarettes. So we go to the RoboCop, right? The fact that the police, or the image of the police, is very, very macho. very dominating, and very aggressive. Right? So we have our community card, and domestic issues as well. You know, whenever there's domestic violence, woman calls, the police show up, sometimes get arrested, sometimes just slap on the wrist, but it never actually, there's no solution, there's no after the fact follow-up, you know? It's essentially putting the dust under the rug, is what they do, right? And yeah, this is a trigger alert. Next 2 videos are going to be harsh to some people. It's violence towards women. So if, yeah, just warning them, cover your ears, close your eyes, step outside for a minute. Shouldn't take more than